Good afternoon. My name is Russ Baxter. I'm the soon-to-be retired Deputy Director for Soil and Water, Dam Safety and Floodplain Management at DCR. And I'm not joking about my retirement. I have about 7.5 days left. We fortunately have my successor on the line today who's going to be listening in, and that's Daryl Glover, who is currently the Division Director for Soil and Water Conservation at the department, and is going to be taking on some of these additional responsibilities as a Deputy Director within the next few days. So we're glad to have Daryl on board, and I'm the only change in the team, and I'd just like to take a minute to tell you who's on the line from DCR. We have Wendy Howard Cooper, who is our Division Director for Dam Safety and Floodplain Management. Our floodplain management team, Angela Davis, Michael Barber, and Brandy Buford. We also have from our public communications office, Julie Buchanan and Mary Bishop, that are helping the wheels go around for this webinar. Thanks again to them for doing the publicity and outreach and setting up the webinar. We really appreciate that. What we would like to do today is spend just the first part of the webinar just to give us some background, everybody some background, so there is a clear understanding of what we're talking about, what the program has been set up to do. And then we are going to just briefly walk through the sections of the manual, of the grant manual that's out on the street right now. We are going to take a little bit of extra time to talk about the resilience plans. There have been a number of questions about those, and we want to just clarify DCR's expectations for those. And then we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. And if you would type your questions into the chat box, we would appreciate it. We will go through and read those questions. We may ask and have you unmute and ask any or provide any clarification if we need any follow-up to some of the questions. That worked fine. It's not such a huge crowd that's not impossible to do. So we want to make sure you leave today with your questions answered. Hopefully we'll be able to answer them all. There may be some things we need to go back home and do some homework on, but we're setting up a brand new program. We don't have all the answers for everything. This is the first grant round we've done with these monies, and so we're building this program, and we know that things are going to change and improve as we work over time. So just a couple of housekeeping reminders. If you would just stay muted unless you're asked to unmute and perhaps expand on a question that you've put into the chat. As some of you probably heard, it came on. We are recording this. We recorded the last one, and it's been posted on our website, on the DCR website. Again, all questions in the chat box. And as I just said, we'll be posting all of not only the chat transcript, but also the recording of this webinar on our website. At the end of my presentation, the web address will have that for you. Really, this just some background, and I think a lot of you may already know this, some of you may not, but this is Virginia's, I think, most aggressive step into resilience and flood prevention in its history. We are looking at developing a flood prepared Virginia across the state. This isn't just a coastal program, this is a statewide program, and we will be giving grants throughout the states. We want projects, and particularly to conform with local desires for the future of resilience of that community. And so we are very much interested in giving out capacity building and planning grants, especially early in this program. And we hope to really empower communities to be able to address what are a variety of issues. Many of you know very well that range depending on the geographic area in which a community is located, the nature of the issues, whether they be from sea level rise, whether they be from the increasing intensity of storms, whether they be from tropical storm events. All of those things are important. And this is really going to be a foundational program as we try to fund some of the solutions to those problems. So where does it come from? Virginia in 2020 joined the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, so-called RGGI. And that program is Virginia's, along with a number of the other northeastern states that are enumerated there on the slide. And 4 times a year, auctions are made of greenhouse gas allowances to electric generation facilities. And the states receive the revenues from those auctions. And that is the basis for the funding for the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. When the General Assembly, first of all, the General Assembly agreed to, and the governor signed the agreement to enter into RGGI, which Virginia entered and joined at the beginning of 2021. And when the RGGI auction monies come in, this is how they are divvied up. 45% goes to the topic that we're talking about today, the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. 50% goes to low-income energy upgrades that are going to be administered by the Department of Housing and Community Development. There are administrative expenses that are both for DHCD, along with some of the work that they're going to be doing with the, actually, that's a typo. It should be Department of Energy. Now it's formerly the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy, DMME, but got renamed as of July 1st. And also DEQ is getting a small slice of the pie to fund Virginia's participation in the RGGI activities and in the RGGI auctions. So what has happened to date? And I will just say that these numbers don't mean that every single dollar that's listed here goes into the fund for granting. We have other obligations, administrative obligations that we work out with the Virginia Resources Authority. But to give you an idea of the magnitude, at least what we've seen so far, and obviously Virginia's only participated in 2 auctions, the total in March was about 43.5 million, which meant 45% was 19.5. And during this grant round, we've put out $18 million to be granted. The June auctions, actually prices were a little bit higher for the allowances. And so this, we got in a little bit more money, a little bit more goes into the fund. We do have a grant round that'll be coming up later in August, and the amount of money available will be announced. Available in each grant round will be announced at the beginning of each grant round. There are 2 more auctions this year, and because it's, these are market-based allowances, it's really hard to predict exactly what will come in any particular auction. But observers, and I'm no expert in RGGI, but observers to date have been surprised at how high the prices are. So it's possible they could come down. We just don't know. But we're talking about, a potentially, quite a few $1 million that will be available through this fund to grant out in any given year. This is the schedule that we've established for this first year of the Community Flood Preparedness Program. Obviously, the 4th of June has already passed, and we've opened the grant round that we're currently in, and it's open for 90 days, and the grant manual has been posted on our website. It was posted on June 4th. We're going to open a second grant round concurrent, at least for a portion of this first grant round, and that'll open on the 5th of August. The first grant round will close, the first 90-day grant round will close on September 3rd, and we expect to announce the awards from that round at the end of September. The second grant round, the one that opens in August, will close in November, And then we expect to, before Christmas, to announce the second grant round awards. We are likely going to be releasing a third grant round manual early in 2022. We have a date there, although that date may have to slip a little bit, particularly if we offer loans, because there's a lot of information that would have to be, excuse me, would have to be placed. Excuse me. A lot of information about loans and other changes to the grant manual would have to be made along with VRS for us to do that. So we may have to put out a grant round or a grant manual for public comment, which may delay the actual grant round itself. So that's our schedule. If you've looked at the grant round, if you haven't, I highly encourage it. But we have obviously a series of sections, the principles that it's based on, series of definitions, just the criteria that the department is going to be using for evaluating applications. We have the series of eligible grant activities, and those are capacity building and planning, flood prevention projects, and studies are the three categories, and all of those, what those are all explained, excuse me, in the manual. We have exactly what you need to provide with each of the grant applications that are contained in Part 4, and then a series of appendices that has scoring criteria, the application forms. Grants are for 36 months, but there's the possibility of extensions, so we have an extension request forms. But anyway, all of that sort of background information that provides some additional clarification. And then we'll be talking about particularly Appendix G in just a moment. So that's the introduction to the manual and to the program and where the money's coming from and all of that sort of stuff. And now, and then finally, before I turn it over to Wendy, this is where where you go if you have questions or are submitting anything related to the program. We've set up a special email address, cfpf@dcr.virginia.gov. Likewise, the grant manual, the recording from this and the other webinars, any other materials that we develop, any training or anything that is related to the Community Flood Preparedness Fund will appear at the website or the web page that's listed on this form. So you can keep checking that for updates. Obviously, when we put out, open up the next grant round, you will be, putting the dates and the various information. The grant manual is not expected to change in any substantial way, simply we just obviously have to change some dates and some other just very, just almost bureaucratic changes for the second grant manual round that'll be coming out very shortly. So I think that's all I had, Wendy. If you want to go ahead and take it from here and talk a little bit about resilience plans, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks, Russ. And I'm going to tag team with one of my team members, Angela Davis, but just a brief overview. Appendix G is where you'll find primarily all the information that you need to know about a resilience plan. There's a definition of a resilience plan in the manual, and it says that a resilience plan means a locally adopted plan that describes the entire local government's approach to flooding. And I ask you to please pay special attention to that, because if you are providing a resilience plan that only addresses flooding in a particular portion of your community, that is not adequate. If you are PDC and you're providing a plan that doesn't address flooding throughout the entire region, that is not adequate. So this definition specifically speaks to the entire local government's approach to flooding. So please pay attention to that. Also want to say that a completed resilience plan will be required before local government can apply for and receive funding for projects. You can certainly apply for capacity building and planning and studies without a resilience plan. We hope those three things help you build a strong resilience plan. But anyone who applies for projects has to have an approved resilience plan in place. Okay, so a plan can either be one document or a combination of documents that meet the elements we're going to go over shortly. Angela's going to go over those with you in just a second. And once the department certifies that the resilience plan is adequate and meets those minimum requirements, it will stand for 3 years. So you don't have to worry about redoing this process every time you do an application. You would just submit your approval letter saying that your plan was approved on X date by DCR, and that would meet that requirement. The resilience plan may refer to any previously adopted standalone plan, or it may reference other plans or documents that you've compiled that meets the elements of the resilience plan definition. So you may have sections of your comprehensive plan or other land use plans or ordinance or your hazard mitigation plan or any other plans that you may have in your community that addresses flooding and resilience. But what's important is if you're going to pull pieces from all of these other documents, you need to give us, it doesn't have to be long or protracted, but really it's more like an executive summary type document where you're telling us for the items that are required that Angela will go over shortly, this information is addressed in this plan on page, whatever page it is, so that we know that that plan actually meets the requirements that we're asking for the resilience plan. So just want to make sure that everyone is clear that you don't have to send us, a newly developed resilience plan, that you can provide us with this 1-page or 2-page summary or whatever you need to do to demonstrate you have developed these elements and other plans and point us to where those plans are, either through a link or through the attachment of the document, however it works for you, so that we can review that information. When you submit resilience plans to DCR, it does go to Cfpf at dcr.virginia.gov, this website that's listed here on the screen, and you do need to include the CID number and your locality name and label it resilience plan so that we can track who is submitting. If you are submitting for multiple localities, put as many of the CID numbers in as you can. If they will not all fit, just simply tell us in the email or in the plan document, that executive summary, that you're actually submitting for all of these localities with the CID number, so we have a good sense of who is incorporated in this plan. Now I'm going to toss to Angela real quick so that she can go over those specific elements that we require in the resilience plan.
Thank you, Wendy. The resilience plan itself does have 5 required elements. The first of which is the plan itself has to be project-based, and the projects have to be focused on flood control and resilience. Those flood control measures are expected to be nature-based to the maximum extent possible. There may be instances where nature-based solutions are not feasible, and that's okay. We're asking that you think about alternatives and solutions that incorporate nature-based solutions to the best of your ability, and again, to the maximum extent possible. It also should include and consider all parts of the local government, which means the resilience plan should address the entirety of the community, regardless of socioeconomics or race. Communities that have both coastal and riverine flood issues should be addressing both. Number 4, it includes coordination with other local and interjurisdictional projects, plans, and activities. And in addition to that, it has a clearly articulated timeline or phasing for plan implementation. And so you may have resiliency built into all kinds of other projects, plans, or initiatives that have already been discussed and documented. When you pull those together, the timeline of implementing that has to be clearly articulated. And if a timeline itself can't be articulated, at least a plan for phasing out the implementation. And the last criteria is that it is based on the best available science and incorporates climate change, sea level rise, and storm surge where appropriate. And please, where possible, use the most current flood maps.
Thank you, Angela. Did you want to refer folks to Appendix G and maybe briefly hit these other items down here? If people have their manual in front of them, if you could refer to Appendix G on page 1-G, there are other elements that we recommend that we think are appropriate for inclusion. We won't go over all of them today, but just keep them in mind as you're developing your plan, things that are important for whole community resilience. All right. Do we have questions?
We do. The first question is, when will funds become available for use after being awarded? In other words, when does the 36-month project period begin?
That will depend on VRA. When
Yes.
we provide our award information out to you all, it will be a preliminary award notification or a preliminary denial. Once we do that, we share that information with VRA. They create the final document, the final agreement with you all. Sometimes it takes a couple of weeks, sometimes it takes 30 days, but the date of the start for your project will be on that agreement.
Yeah, it's on page 12 of the manual. Wendy's absolutely right. That critical day is when the signed agreement between VRA and the grantee is made. Second question is there a presentation that's supposed to accompany this? I don't understand it. There is a presentation that we just went through. I didn't know if there was something more. Perhaps the questioner can put a follow-up question in the chat.
Jessica, are you asking about the resilience plan discussion that just occurred? If you are,
sorry.
all of that, yeah, it's okay. If that's what you're referring to, all of that information that I shared is actually in the grant manual, and Appendix G is where you will find the information that you need.
Yes, my apologies. I was thinking of the previous presentation. Yes, that's absolutely right. What is our definition of best science available? Same as everybody else's. I don't think, we're going to look at what information is used in any particular grant proposal and inquire, or we have expertise on staff to determine whether or not that's the best information that is available for that project. Next one is, what is the process for submitting and having a resilience plan approved by DCR? Wendy?
Sure. The resilience plan has to be submitted to Cfpf at dcr.virginia.gov, as outlined in the grant manual. My team, Angela, Brandy, Michael, and I, review the resilience plan against those 5 elements that are in Appendix G to see if they meet those specific requirements. And if they do, we will send you an approval letter. If they do not, depending on the timing, because if you get your resilience plan to us with your application, you may not have time to course correct and get your application in to address the deficiencies in your resilience plan, because we will not approve a project if we don't have an approved resilience plan. So our process has been
that there's another grant round coming up if there needs to be some modifications.
Yes. And once we review your plan, we would send you a letter, and we have been operating on a 2-week time frame. Whenever we get the resilience plan, we go through it and we provide feedback, and that's either going to be an approval or request for additional information. Once we get that resubmission, we would do probably another 2 weeks, depending on the timeline and how many plans we have to review, to provide you that second correspondence.
Thank you, Wendy. The next question is, if we write a resilience plan with CFPF funds, and then we submit for funds to implement one of the projects in the plan that is 3 years past the time we wrote the plan, do we have to have it reapproved?
The plan that you would develop with the planning grant does not start your time frame. Your time frame starts when we approve that plan associated with a project application.
The next question is a comment. The slides are not changing on the screen. That's because nobody's changing slides on the screen. We've just got that up for information. There won't be any additional slides presented. The next question is, I just want to confirm, if a locality is listed in a PDC's regional plan, which is approved, then the locality does not need their own individual plan in order to qualify for flood prevention and protection projects?
I would say that if your locality is included in a PDC resilience plan and it meets your needs for your entire community, and the projects that are being put forth actually address those needs, you really don't have to have a separate resilience strategy for the purpose of this grant. However, if you wanted to do something on your own as a locality that is not included in that plan, you would need a separate resilience strategy to cover everything that you want to do.
All right, Jessica clarified her comment. Thank you. The next question, when would project activities for awarded projects from this first round be eligible for reimbursement? Is that also dependent on VRA funding timeline?
As outlined in the grant manual, there will be documents in your agreement that will allow you to request reimbursement. The projects will need to be submitted and approved by DCR using the forms that are that will be in your agreement. And then once they're approved by DCR, the reimbursement request should be submitted, and that must include detailed invoices and corresponding proof of payment, so that we can in fact pay your reimbursement. We follow the Prompt Pay Act. We will generally have payments made within 30 days of a complete invoice. And when I say complete invoice, that means at the point that all of the questions have been answered. So if we're going back and forth with you regarding documentation or needing information, it is at the point that we have accepted the invoice and all of the documentation that 30-day clock starts.
And Julie Buchanan, one of our staff, was put a link to the manual in the chat as well, just for those if you need to click on it right now. And Appendix G is on page, it's literally the last page of the manual. The next question is, it seems as though some studies may be useful to inform resilience planning. The grant application form seems to require applicants to select only one category, so either studies or planning. if we want to pursue a study and planning, would we need to apply under 2 different funding cycles? Would the study have to fully conclude before we could submit an application for planning?
You can apply for both.
Yeah, you could apply for both. And it could be part of one proposal, I think.
As long as all of the information is there,
Yeah.
I would recommend that you think carefully about doing one application with multiple components as opposed to a separate application for each one that you're trying to do. Most of the data is redundant, so you wouldn't have to recreate the wheel. It is a separate checklist, however, separate scoring criteria that is necessary for each type of project to be sure that you don't miss anything. My recommendation would be that you do a separate application, although it is not required.
The next question, if a CFPF grant is awarded for a study on a portion of a city, does that grant award impact the ability of projects identified in that study to be funded by CFPF at a later date? See if a grant award is reported.
It does not.
Yeah.
What the manual states is that we will not refund the same project. We will fund phases of various projects, and we will fund different projects throughout the community, which is why it's really important to have that information in your resilience plan. Because if you identify areas of concern or areas where there is consistent flooding that need to be addressed, you could say, this is the timeline. As Angela mentioned, it's really important to talk about how you want to address the whole community and what that timeline looks like. So we would expect to see that. And when you send your first grant application in, we would see, according to your resilience plan, okay, this is what they're working on. And phase 1 of this project is 3 years. Phase 2 of this project will be the next 3 years. And now they're also going to start addressing this section of the community that's identified in the resilience plan. So it's really important that you have some real thought and consideration about the whole community and how you want to address it and what is critical, and prioritize those projects within your community.
The next question is, how many resilience plans have been submitted to DCR? How many have been approved? Are the approved ones available for review?
DCR has received 2 resilience plans. Both were returned for additional information, and they are under review right now. They have not been approved. So we do not have anything at this time to provide to the community or to any additional applicants.
Next question. Thank you, Matthew. It looks like we got your question. I think we would all be curious to see examples of developed and approved plans. This is similar to the last question, or narrative statements that outline the elements of a plan in existing plans. Want to take a shot at that, Wendy?
Sure, certainly.
We don't exactly have that, but we have, I think, a lot of information in the manual, but go ahead.
Right, we do have a lot of information in the manual about things that are required and also elements that we think are appropriate to include in the resilience plan. Because of the short timeline for this project, we did not have an opportunity to do a great deal of training and technical assistance ahead of time, which is why we're trying to do these meetings right now to help folks move along in this continuum. If you don't have a resilience plan, I would recommend that you apply for a grant to develop one, and then DCR can provide that technical assistance to you, or you can apply for a grant that allows you to hire a consultant to help you with that, so that you can get the greatest benefit in your resilience plan.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to understand that, this is for the long term. we're very much interested in getting communities to a point where, they can begin to implement projects. Some may already be at that point, but there are a lot of communities that haven't really spent the time on developing resilience and flooding issues as they might have. And so that's really something we'd like to emphasize. Not all the money is going to be spent this time. Money's coming in 4 times a year. This is a long-term project that we're building. And part of that, I think, is building the capacity of localities, of local governments in Virginia to address these issues. So we really want to work with you on that, and don't be shy about applying for the kind of capacity building and planning grants that are contained in the manual. The next question, are there match requirements for grant application funding? What are the rules governing local or regional match? The answer to that, I can take this, Wendy, is yes. All of the match requirements are contained in the manual. If I can find the page here, I'll tell you real quick what those are. Now I'm not finding the page, but in any case, we do have match depending on the nature of the project, depending on whether it is a project for a low-income community. So there are a variety of things. Page 8. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I apologize. I've got the manual up on a different screen and going back and forth between mouses. Yes, beginning part 2 under the General Department, grant eligibility criteria and application procedures, all of the various match requirements are listed. Next question, will the applications to the fund be made public? That's a good question.
Typically, we do not release applicants, we release awards.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll be in communication with any awardee that is, or any prospective grantee that is not successful, and let them know. But generally, what we announce are the awards themselves. Let's see here. Oops. That was the last question that has appeared in the box. Happy to sit for a minute if anything has come to mind. We don't want to take unnecessary time, but we want this to be as valuable as possible. I will say, just in the interim, if you have any more questions, go ahead and think about those and go ahead and type them in. One of the purposes of this program, and it's important to understand that 25% of the funds that are being acquired through the Reggie auctions and being deposited into the fund are for low-income communities. And so that there is a great deal of interest in ensuring that the fund is used in an equitable fashion. There's also, as you'll see in the code, if you go to the section of the code that establishes the fund, is very much interested in nature-based solutions. And so I think those are some of the things that we'll be looking for in particular that are the General Assembly decided were particularly important in the establishment of this fund. But all of the definitions and any of the various requirements related to those particular aspects of this program are contained in the manual. Well, you're an easy crowd. You're going easy on us today. Wendy, would you like to offer any follow-up remarks?
I think we got a really long question that we need to address.
Here we go. There was somebody, it took them a while. All right, here we go. Thank you. The flood fund definition for low income is clear that 100% of a locality can qualify as a low income locality. To determine if 100% of a locality qualifies, one must take 80% of the number and compare that to the number of localities, household income number. Is it acceptable to use the Virginia median household income?
Yes. Let me answer that one, Russ.
Yeah. Before I haven't even
DCR
finished reading.
Yeah. DCR in its review of the applications will be using Census Bureau data, the most recent data available, that establishes the Virginia median household income, and compare that against a whole locality if the entire locality is requesting that information, requesting that low-income demographic area. But if a locality is requesting that designation for a particular area within a locality, the Census Bureau also has data to the zip code level that provides median income information, and we will use that data to compare against the locality's information. So your question, yes, that is absolutely correct. We'll be using 80% of the Virginia median household income when there is a whole community applying. We will be using the individual zip code or the area defined by the community against the community's median income, if that is the case for the application.
The next question, to maximize fund matching, would you recommend breaking up studies and targeting an entire community into 2 applications, one for low income areas and one for the rest of the community?
I can answer that.
Go ahead, and I've got an observation if you don't make it.
Sure. I think that you can submit an application for multiple studies with a portion of the study being designated for the low-income area and have a separate match component for that piece. DCR is not going to dictate to you as an applicant whether you should only do a portion of your community or do a whole community. The only stipulation that we have is that it has to be completed within the 36-month time frame that's dictated in the manual, or within whatever specified extension period that may be granted. So that is really up to the community based on your resilience strategy.
The next question is, can a town or city rely on a CFM at a PDC to be their locally certified floodplain manager?
If that is the arrangement and the locality has some has access to that CFM as part of their normal relationship with the PDC, that is okay. I would encourage, however, that the community considers how having a dedicated floodplain manager and CFM within their community can help them, and applying for a capacity building grant that may allow you to create and hire for that position.
I think Denise was commenting on your answer. She says that you may get different results with the 2 different methods. This was related to the Virginia median household income question.
Right, you will get 2 different results depending on what your project is. If it's community-wide, the community median income is going to be assessed against the state median income. If it is a selected community or neighborhood, I'll just say neighborhood, if it's a selected neighborhood within a community, that neighborhood's median income is going to be assessed against the community's median income. It will absolutely be a different result because the areas that are being impacted are different.
Here's a follow-up on a resilience plan question. If localities opt to incorporate the elements of the resilience plan outlined in the manual into their hazard mitigation plan and/or comprehensive plan, will DCR provide technical assistance during that process? DCR is usually involved in the hazard mitigation plan updates. this is new to most of us. Technical assistance and examples would be very helpful.
Absolutely, DCR will provide technical assistance.
Yep. Okay. That's the last question. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Wendy. Would small incorporated towns be able to use their county CFM? Most towns in the region are not likely to have that capacity. I think the answer is the same. Yeah, go ahead.
The answer is yes. And again, one of the primary focus of this grant is to help communities build capacity. So if that is something that you see as a need that you don't currently have, I recommend that you think about how this grant can actually help you fill that hole in your community.
You know, our interest, I think, is building that capacity statewide. Again, this is a statewide program, and there are a lot of local governments, towns, particularly given their size. Some towns are relatively big, but generally not. You know, but building that capacity, you know, in all jurisdiction is something that is really a goal of this program that will benefit us for years to come. So Wendy's absolutely right, is that, you know, that is our preference, but obviously it isn't something, you don't go from zero to having a CFM overnight. But we think that that's the kind of thing, given the changes in climate, given sea level rise, given all of the issues of resilience that we're facing, is building that capacity statewide is going to benefit.
And it's critically important in our NFIP communities to have CFMs on deck to manage the floodplain management requirements of our communities. This is really not just about building a project or creating projects that stop flooding right now. This is about building a process in our communities that allows them to manage floodplain management forever, so that they have this capacity, this understanding, and this depth in their communities to help them manage these processes. And something to consider for the smaller communities, you may want to have a sharing agreement where you have one person who's hired and a portion of their salary is covered by multiple small communities, and that person is your CFM, your floodplain manager, who manages the communities. The requirement in the grant is that it is a locally employed CFM. That really means that you can't hire a consultant to do your application and sign off as a CFM. It has to be someone who is tied to the community and understands what the needs are of the community. And that's why we're really pushing this, because we need this to be a permanent solution or permanent help in our communities as we try to stay in compliance with the NFIP and build more resilience to climate change and sea level rise and all of the things that are going on that we see happening right now.
Thank you, Wendy. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but if there are any, now would be the time to do that. Otherwise, we don't want to unnecessarily take your time. This is the second of 3 webinars that we're having for this initial round. The next one is exactly, I think, isn't it exactly a month from today? I think we did them all on the 15th. Somebody jump in.
It's the 13th of August.
I got the first 2 right. So we'll be doing one on the 13th of August. As we noted, this grant round ends on September 3rd at 4 o'clock, as I recall. And so if there are questions or some additional support or interaction that you need to have with DCR, those contact information, sending an email would be best, and then we'll get back to you with you know, trying to provide whatever assistance we can in answering your questions. But one last question: have we received? And Yeah, any grant proposals yet? No, we haven't.
We have not. And as Russ said, it would be very helpful if you have questions, send them to cfpf@dcr.virginia.gov. I'm tracking that email box to make sure that we can answer questions for folks as soon as possible. It helps us have one point of entry for folks for all questions so that we can be sure that we don't miss anything. So if you do have questions, please do send that to cfpf@dcr.virginia.gov.
Yeah, I'll tell Denise, we expect to get a lot of grant proposals at 3:59 on the 3rd. So we know a lot of times things tend to come in a little bit late. And this is a new program and we get that. One of the reasons we're having this slew of grant proposals or of grant opportunities initially, the first one starting and then the second one overlapping is just to give people some opportunity to, if they don't feel as pressured to make the first, if you feel like additional work needs to be done to get it in on the second grant proposal, please take that time. But we're here to help you and to provide any questions or information that you might need to have successful proposals. We don't want to sit on this money. We want this money to help prevent floods and increase resilience in Virginia. So our interest is getting it out the door for sure. If there are no further questions, thank you. We got one more. If we're developing a climate resilient plans that includes but is not limited to flooding, can this funding be used to fund that plan development? I think it's hard to prejudge a proposal. I think we would want to see what we're buying with this money. The code is fairly specific in terms of it being for flooding, but obviously that's an important part of an overall climate resilience plan. So I think that we want to take a look at that kind of proposal and make a judgment about to what degree the code and the grant manual would allow us to what extent we would be able to allow a broader funding in that case. But it's fairly, the code's fairly specific about what the purpose of this fund is. Any other thoughts or comments? Any staff or Wendy or anyone that would like to make any comments before we close?
No, I just want to thank everyone for joining us, and please do not hesitate to reach out as you go through this process. cfpf@dcr.virginia.gov. We will get back to you. We will assist you in any way possible. If communities are struggling with how to do a grant application, whether they should do a grant application, whatever they need to do, DCR will help to the greatest extent possible to help you through this process.
Amen. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for the time this afternoon. As we said, there's one more coming up later in the month. Each one, so far, at least the two we've had, different types of questions. So it may be useful for you to participate in all three because a variety of different types of questions are being asked. One last question came in. Is there a means to inquire to DCR if our locality has reached out? Unless we have gotten a communication from that locality, I don't believe we have from Suffolk. Wendy, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I've not heard from Suffolk.
Yeah, no, we have not.
Angela, Brandy, Michael, have you all received any engagement from Suffolk?
Have not.
No.
No.
So that might be something to suggest to the city of Suffolk to become engaged with this. And as I said, this is a long-term thing. We expect the Reggie auctions, or at least those that are expert in Reggie, expect auctions to be in place for close to a decade. So this is going to be a fairly consistent, it's obviously going to vary, as I've said before, amount of money that is going to be a foundation. It's not going to solve all of our problems. We're still going to be looking for federal money, for local money, for nonprofit money, for philanthropy, and whatever we can get to cobble together literally the billions of dollars that Virginia will need to address some of these issues. But we think that this is a good foundation for the state and is definitely going to have benefit for our localities. So thank you for your time today. Again, as Wendy graciously offered, we're here to help. And we look forward to seeing some innovative and forward-thinking proposals as we move forward. So thank you all very much.